Why you should be alone more often. Being alone is a test most people fail. If you can't sit with your own thoughts, you don't control your mind. Your mind controls you. When you sit alone and you're by yourself for a majority of the day and you're in isolation, silence forces you to confront your habits, your distractions, and your reality. Give you time to reflect on your habits, your decision making, the people you're surrounding yourself with, the food you're intaking, and life by and large. You're able to look at what you've done and what you haven't done, and it forces you to confront these brutal realities most of the time, because more times than not, you're occupied. You're reacting, you're doing something that's not allowing you to self-reflect and sit with yourself to confront these actions you've been doing in your decision making. You'll learn a lot about yourself just sitting by yourself. If you right now were to pause this video and go sit for yourself for 10 minutes and not be distracted by phones, television, music, games, you just put it all down and you sat with yourself in your mind, you'll learn a lot about yourself in those 10 minutes that you probably learned the whole week. Thoughts are going to start forming and you're going to ultimately self-reflect on what you've been doing. When you sit by yourself and you're going to find out what's really going on in your mind and has been, you're going to figure out all the samskaras or things you've been pushing down and been trying to hide and get away from, and all the things that are just right in your face that you know all along, and things you've been doing. Whether this be good, whether this be bad, it'll ultimately indicate the way you feel in that moment depending on how it's been going. That's when your emotions will kick in, because you're having these thoughts, you're thinking about these thoughts, and you're ultimately feeling them, leading you to either be proud of yourself, to be sad, to be upset, to be motivated, you know? That's for you to decide the life you've been living. When you do this more often, you ultimately find yourself wanting to succeed, because when you're by yourself and alone, that's when you're confronted, and you don't want to feel bad. You don't want to feel like you've wasted your life. You want to ultimately feel fulfilled and accomplished. So moving forward, your intentions are going to be more pure and intent, and you're going to move with a clear conscience. You're going to work towards goals you have and to get things done that you want to get done. You're going to build emotional control. You're going to need no constant validation for noise, for dopamine. Weak minds need constant stimulation. Strong minds create their own focus. It's going to teach you to be comfortable when the dopamine hits. When phone, entertainment, and people aren't around there to give you that quick dopamine, that quick conversation, that quick laugh, that quick interaction with your phone. Swipe up that like, that DM, that reel. Being alone is where you develop clarity, not confusion. Most people push networking, socializing, being around others, going out, going to the club with your boy, getting a drink, hitting a vape, hanging out with friends. But when you flip it, growth always requires isolation. On the contrast, always surrounded equals distracted, while alone is focused, aware, and intentional. Frame it as a competitive advantage. While everyone needs noise, you operate in silence. You tap into deeper truth. The deeper truth that people often avoid because they don't like what they'll discover. As I mentioned, the reality of their life, the reality of their emotions, the reality of their thoughts. So being alone is ultimately going to help your self-awareness, your emotional independence, and your discipline. Now, if you have sat alone and you've done this, and when you do start practicing this and demonstrating this, you're going to find that in this alone time is where you start setting goals, is where goals get created and formed and then, ultimately accomplished, and where habits get evaluated. You're going to be looking at your life through a lens. Like this camera I'm looking at, you're going to be looking at yourself just as this camera is looking at me. You're going to be looking at it through a close lens, through a mid lens, through a far lens. You're going to see all the minor details that you've missed and all the big details that are just right in front of your face. And that's where you ultimately make adjustments. Like any professional coach, like any professional athlete would do, they go back and they watch film, they study, they figure out the things they're good at and things they're bad at. They work to their strengths and they practice their weaknesses, so they're ultimately prepared in every realm of what you're doing. And this is life. So you want to be prepared in life and see where your weaknesses are. And ultimately this is where you'll grow, because you're going to know what you need to get better at, what you are good at, what people you need to surround yourself that are going to elevate you from your weaknesses, people you don't need to be around, and where direction gets corrected. Because sometimes you might be thinking you're going in the right path, but then when you actually look through a different lens and you evaluate yourself, to be seeing that that's not the direction you need to be headed, and you need to maybe make a left turn. Like if you think you know where you're going, like when you miss a turn and the GPS is on and it reroutes you, same concept. But this time the difference is you're the GPS. You're the one taking advantage, taking initiative to your own life. When you're alone, you get comfortable with the quietness, you get comfortable with yourself. It's almost like meditation. You're used to these things. So now when you're in real life, a storm hits, you feel isolated and trapped, you're gonna be able to deal with these times because you've had enough self-analyzation, you've had enough experience in moments when it's quiet, you've had enough experience ultimately when you're alone just with yourself and nothing else is distracting you. Like when a fighter goes into the ring, he's not just an adrenaline junkie fighting off straight adrenaline. He's using all of the times he was in practice, all of his techniques, all of his workouts, all of his nutritional habits, and ultimately his mindset that he got going into the fight through experience, through training, through repetition. It's the same thing now when you're in situations where it's quiet, you're properly prepared, and you know what the next best move is on the chessboard because you've been in this scenario multiple times. You've trained your mind and yourself to be ready for these outcomes, to be ready for anything that comes, and you're gonna ultimately figure out what you need to work on, what you don't need to work on, because being alone is what's gonna prepare you for this. You'll also be self-aware and socially aware when you're in public, people that don't spend time alone. You'll start recognizing and realize friends, strangers that often need dopamine, that need to be around people that are social for their own destruction. They might not even see it themselves, but you'll be able to recognize it a mile away just by the way you interact with them. You'll be able to see their habits on how much they use their phone, how much they go out, how much they ask you to go out, and you'll probably realize and come to a conclusion that they don't spend a lot of time alone because they don't want to sit with the reality. They don't want to sit with they don't want to sit with their true thoughts, their emotions. And yes, they might have their own problems, but at the end of the day, everyone has the ability to sit alone. Whether you know it or not, the benefits or doubts, you're watching this video and now you know the truth. You should sit alone for all set reasons. And a lot of people, to their own destruction, don't even know it's not sitting alone is honestly a destruction to themselves because they're more reliant on people. It's almost like being reliant on a substance. They need a substance to feel a certain way. They need people to feel a certain way. They don't want to sit with the reality of their thoughts, their emotions, about what's really going on in their life, whether they know it or not. They choose not to confront that because that's being in silence. A lot of people that have these problems and do avoid being alone in isolation, the one time they do feel it is when right before they go to bed, when they're in bed alone. And oftentimes than not, these people rely on substances, nicotine, pens, vapes, maybe even alcohol, their phone to go to bed because they can't confront this reality for as simple as 5-10 minutes before they sleep. They need something to feed off of, some sort of dopamine right before they go to bed to occupy their mind so they don't need to deal with this reality. Now, people that don't, on the flip side, get better sleep, they have a better start to the next day, and they ultimately have more emotional and mind control of themselves. They're able to conduct themselves when shit hits the fan, and in times of adversity, and when stuff's not going well, and when there is pressure. Because they've been alone so much, they know their strengths, their weaknesses, and they're often confronted on what direction they're going, and they'll be able to know the next best move to make. That's why you should spend more time alone.